All right. Well, my name is Evan. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ, and I still struggle with the same things I did earlier, which are alcohol, marijuana, and pornography. And I'm glad we got that in recording because for the last, 2 months, I have not introduced myself. I keep telling myself I'm going to do it. So, tonight we're going to talk about ready. Ready. And ready is going to fall underneath principle 5, which is what we're going to, is voluntarily submit every change to God wants to make in my life and humbly ask him to remove my character defects. Happy are those whose greatest desire is to do what God requires, Matthew 5:6. Which falls in line, we're going to be with step 6 in principle 5. So step 6, we were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Remember that, defects of character. We're going to talk a lot about that. Humble yourselves before the Lord and he will lift you up. James 4:10. So we've talked a lot about the hard stuff, okay? So as we have gone through the recovery journey over the past few months, we have talked about our inventories, right? How we're going to write our inventories, what we're going to do to give our inventories in. Once we've written our inventories and then presenting it to someone, we're going to confess. And then we have to admit. Well, now that we've confessed, we've admitted, we need to be ready, okay? And we're going to go over a few points with ready. And we're going to talk about some of the hard stuff, guys. And I want to take a quick step back and I want to share with you, my ready point. As most of you already know, I was an alcoholic. I was a weed addict. I was a porn addict. And I was so consumed with keeping my porn a secret from those around me that it gave me so much stress and anxiety that I started drinking and using in excess and using weed and drinking. Because the pornography had eaten me up so much, because I felt so bad about what I was doing, keeping it away from those around me, keeping it away from my wife, my best friend. And so I had to start drinking. I had to use the weed. It was the only way to shut out the pressure and the stress and the responsibilities in my life on any given day. I didn't find recovery while I was an alcoholic, but I had to choose my family or the booze. And so at that time, I chose my family. My wife came to me and she's like, look, you either need to stop what you're doing or you're going to lose us. Okay, and so I was like, look, that was kind of an aha moment right there. But the thing was, I really wasn't ready to give up alcohol, but I knew that it was selfish of me enough in my mind that I needed to stop doing this because it was hurtful. Well, in order to cope, I jump right into marijuana, right? I continue to use this weed. And that's when God led me to CR. And it was at that point I had the moment of clarity. I'd hit my rock bottom. I had finally told myself that looking at porn and smoking weed was not going to make me a better person. I was ready to stop. But the real questions I had to ask myself was, am I ready to stop lying? Am I ready to stop being greedy? Ready to let go of my resentments? I had been self-medicating for so long in these sins that they had taken root in my life. And these defects of character or these sins have been a part of me for so many years. And that's what we're going to talk about. In this principle, you and me and God, we're going after all these defects, okay? So we're going to talk about these character defects and the sins. And the first thing we need to do to start this process is we need to be able to release our control. It's been said that willingness is the key that goes into the lock and opens the door that allows God to begin to remove your character defects. For so long, I wanted to give up control in just this one area of my life. I would say, God, I will surrender my will over to you and live for you, but I don't want to give up my porn addiction. I want to keep control of that. Can I just have that and still have a good relationship with you? I've talked about this before. Because for so long, the alcohol and the weed was not the problem that I really felt was a really big deal. Okay, because for me, alcohol and marijuana, I have to physically get up out of my chair, get in my vehicle, drive, give the person behind the counter my money, all the while thinking in my head, I have way more opportunity to have my willpower go and say, I'm not going to do that. But how can I get through my willpower if all I have to do is pick up my phone and press a few things? All I have to do is get in front of any kind of social media and it's there. Okay, so that was hard for me. And it had been my friend and my close friend for so long. Through all the years of my marriage, before I started drinking, before I started the weed, I wanted to have a relationship with Christ, but I also wanted to have my high, my fix. And so I wanted to not release control. I wanted to have both. And trust me, I had multiple conversations with God about, why can't I have both? I love you. Why can't I just do this and follow you? I didn't want to release control. We have to release control, guys. And I'm just letting you guys know that I struggle with it to this day. I struggle with pornography to this day. I am not perfect. I am not standing up here, and I'm not going to lie to you, that I have my moments. And I have no problem telling you that because this is who I am. I want you guys to know that I am not 110% completely cured. I still struggle, and I will struggle with it for the rest of my life. But the one thing I do know is that I can keep coming back here every Tuesday, and I can talk to my brothers, and I can call up my brothers, and I can call up my sponsor, and I can talk to them about those things. It's coming here and getting out my character defects, releasing control that I'm able to find victory over that temptation and that sin. And God gives me that power and lifts me up to conquer my fears. And that is what Psalms 143:10 says. Help me to do your will, for you are my God. Lead me in good paths, for your spirit is good. Guys, simply put, the R for release control is let go and just let God. That brings us on to the E. Easy does it. Easy does it, guys. Look, these principles and steps are not quick. They're not. And as you get into a step study, you will know that pretty quick because you will spend time on these principles, on one principle, on one step, and you will get in there and you will start to really understand because you come here every Tuesday and we recite these steps and we recite these principles. But I urge you to strongly think about what these principles and what these steps mean to you in your recovery. Read over them as we go through them. Really think about them as I am teaching this lesson. Really think about what does it mean to me. And this principle goes further than just helping you stop doing wrong. Remember, this sin is this symptom of the character defect. Okay, so your sin is a symptom of your character defect. So let me explain. In my case, my sin was the weed that needed to be pulled out from the roots, okay? Otherwise, it just keeps growing, and the roots are the defects of character that cause that sin. Okay, so it's kind of like the defects of my character that caused me to do those things. So I wanted that dopamine high. In my mind, I wanted to let go of all of my stress, of all of my anxiety, and I didn't want to feel anything. I just wanted to be numb. Okay, that was my defect. The sin was going and looking at pornography. was going to the weed. Okay? So the defects of character and the sin follow each other, okay? Because one is rooted, and the only way to get rid of that is to pull it by the roots. So my major sins were alcohol and the weed and the porn. We've discussed that. And these were the acts of sins. But I needed these sins in my life, or I thought I needed these sins in my life, in order to function, to keep everything together in my life. So when I started Principle 5, I had to go after the root of why I was sinning. And I strongly, strongly urge each and every one of you to stop and think, what is the root cause of why I do what I do? Why am I here at Celebrate Recovery? Why do I come through these doors on a Tuesday night? What is my root cause? What do I keep running back to that's causing me to sin? What am I unhappy with in my life that I have to drown it out by coping with some kind of sin? Okay? And that takes time. But God will do it. He promised. In Psalms 37:5, he said, commit everything you do to the Lord. Commit everything you do to the Lord. Trust him to help you do it, and he will. Man, I don't want to commit everything. I just talked about this. I want to have my cake and eat it too. You know, I said that last time I did my lesson, but that is exactly how my life was. But you have to commit everything that you're dealing with to the Lord. That's what this is saying. That's what Psalms 37:5 is saying, is you have to commit to the Lord. Trust him. And know that it takes time, guys. It takes time. But be sure to remember this when you get discouraged. Because I continued to use marijuana while still coming to CR. Because when I had come to CR, originally my epiphany was, there is hope for my pornography addiction. Okay, the weed was another one of those sins based on my character defects. And so I still wanted that weed because I wanted that coping mechanism, because I had stress and I had a hard day, so I deserved to go home and let it all out, right? Because I deserve it. I deserve it. That's the big problem. But it wasn't until, I don't know how many months in recovery, before I finally contacted my sponsor and I said, I'm ready to quit. But I'm ready to quit. But was I really ready to quit? And it wasn't until one of my brothers called me out on it and said, why don't you just throw it away? We're at lunch. He's like, just throw it away. I'm like, you've got to be out of your mind. Because I had just spent money buying weed, and I said, oh, this will be my last one, right? I didn't want to release that control. This will be the last one. How many times have we said that? This will be the last time. Sure enough, man. It was that day I went home. I told my wife, I said, look, I need your help. We got everything having to do with my weed. Everything. Threw it in a garbage can, tied it up, and took it out to the dumpster, and I haven't touched it since. Praise God. But it took time, guys. There comes a moment in your recovery where you're like, man, I am ready to take that step. I couldn't do it on my own willpower, but I feel like I can do it now. And that's when you take that step. That's when you take that time and say, easy does it, but I'm ready to do it. Okay? All right, so let's go to the A. Accept the change. Seeing the need for change and allowing the change to occur are two different things, okay? So the space between recognition and willingness can be filled with fear. Okay, I'm going to say it again. The space between recognition and willingness can be filled with fear. And besides that, fear can trigger our old dependency on self-control. But this principle will not work if you are still trapped by your self-will. We need to be ready to accept God's help throughout the transition. And the Bible makes that very clear when we look at 1 Peter 1:13 and 14. So then, have your minds ready for action. Keep alert and set your hope completely on the blessings which will be given you when Jesus Christ is revealed. Be obedient to God and do not allow your lives to be shaped by those desires you had when you were still ignorant. The desires you had when you were still ignorant. I don't know about you guys, but I am never ignorant. I am always totally like, yep, accepting of everything. Yeah? Nothing? Nothing from you guys? All right. I'll stop, I guess. So as you become ready, remember that you're going to change from the inside out. The more roots you pull and the more defects of character you get rid of, it allows you to let God work in your life to make changes. Good changes, but you have to accept those changes, right? Case in point, I changed because I let my will down and I allowed God to change me. So no longer was I bound by Evan's bondage of what Evan wanted because I had found recovery. So I started coming to CR. I started getting phone numbers of accountability partners. I got myself hooked up in a step study, right? And I started doing some serious soul searching because for many years, guys, I've been married for 17 years, and for many years, I had never truly had a relationship with Christ until I really started to understand why I was doing what I was doing. What is causing me to do these things? And as I started to hash that out, as I started to write that down in my step study, just like we are going through these lessons, I started to change from the inside out. But I had to allow God to change me. And it is amazing if you let God change you, how little things stop bothering you as much. It is so crazy to see the change. Guys, I would come and see my wife at work, and people are like, what is up with Evan? He just seems different. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. Pastor Justin, he's like, I can tell there's a difference in you. That was amazing. But I had to accept that change. And it was only by Celebrate Recovery and my relationship with God and allowing Him into my heart to change me that I was able to do that. Let's move on to the D. Do replace your character defects. This is a very hard one for me. Basically, out with the old, in with the new. Get rid of the bad, fill it with something good, okay? So I spent a lot of time, and you have spent a lot of time, on your hang-ups, your compulsions, your obsessions, and your habits. When God removes one, you need to replace it with something positive, such as recovery meetings, church activities, 12th step service, which we're going to go over when we get to the 12 steps. Volunteering. But if you don't do something to fill up that void that is now there, you leave yourself open for a negative character defect to return. Listen to Matthew 12, 43 through 45. When an evil spirit goes out of the person, it travels over dry country, looking for a place to rest. If it can't find one, it says to itself, I will go back to my house. So it goes back and finds the house empty. Then it goes out and brings along 7 other spirits, even worse than itself, and they come and they live there. So it's like coming back tenfold. Saying, oh, he kicked me out, but he's not doing anything different. I'm going to come back. See, guys, I wasted countless hours trying to get my fix. I had really, really hard time filling my time in a positive way. I still have a hard time filling my time in a positive way. I did not know how to cope. My body certainly didn't either. I still have a problem with that to this day because I got rid of these things that my body was dependent on and my dopamine levels, and all of a sudden I didn't have that anymore. I didn't have that release. So what do I do? Where do I go? How do I cope with this new Evan? I eventually really started immersing myself into my step study. I started making it to CR every week. I was there every week. I started going to church again on Sundays with my family. I eventually joined the church's facilities ministry team. I started to get to know my pastors and my elders. Never knew them. I got rebaptized as a sign of my new life. And I felt God calling me to start this CR ministry here because I felt like it was a need that needed to happen. I really believe in this ministry and what it can do to bring the lost and broken to a loving God who shows them true freedom. That's what it's all about. True and lasting freedom, guys. Because if you don't replace your character defects, you are setting yourself up for failure. Find ways to fill the time you spent getting your fix on good things. That's why I say, look, get involved with your local church. Join a step study. Be an accountability partner. You don't have to do those things. Start a Bible study. Get involved with a Bible study. Find out the programs that your church is doing on the weekdays, on the weeknights, on the weekends, whatever it is, and immerse yourself in those things. If you don't know a lot about the Bible, start reading it more. Because before my recovery, I never read the Bible. To be completely honest with you guys, I have never read the Bible all the way through. But I'm working on it. My wife loves the history of the Bible. And she used to talk to me about it all the time. And I'm like, that's stupid. Like, why do I want to know what a bunch of dudes did back then? How ignorant was I? Because now I've learned about Exodus and the Exodus from Egypt and how everything connects together. And you know what the forefront of all that is? Is God and His faithfulness to us. All the time. But immerse yourself in something. I cannot tell you how important it is, and I'm sure people have told you and told you and told you, but until you start doing it, get up in the morning and the first thing that should be through your head is, I need to do my devotions, I need to pray. If you can't do your devotions, then at least get down on your knees and pray. It changes your day. My wife and I never used to get up together and pray together. It is like an off day when her and I cannot sit down on the couch and pray together. To talk out our problems together. We have started doing that. I'm not going to stand up here and tell you I've got it all figured out, that I do it all the time. But when we have the opportunity to get up at the same times, we read devotions together and we pray together. I will pray out loud and then she prays out loud. To go to the last one, yield to the growth. You need to yield to the growth. So at first, your old self-doubts and your low self-image may tell you that you're not worthy of growth and progress that you're making in this program. Guys, don't listen. Yield to the growth. It's the Holy Spirit's work within you, which 1 John 3:9 tells us. The person who has been born into God's family does not make a practice of sinning, because now God's life is in him. So he can't keep sinning. For this new life has been born into him and controls him. He has been born again. That's an awesome verse. You have been born into God's family. You have been accepted by God. But you cannot grow without releasing that control. You see, everything that we talked about tonight in Ready all correlates into what's the common denominator? What's the one thing that will ruin all of the acrostic? Me. You. Your willpower. It's all about making the choice and taking the first step in your life to say, I'm going to release control. I am ready to take that next step. I am ready to do these things, Lord. Take me and use me as you would see fit. Guys, I'm going to finish tonight's lesson off by asking you this question, okay? Are you entirely ready to voluntarily submit to any and all changes God wants to make in your life? When you go out of here tonight and you leave, after you've left small group and you get back to your life and you start your day tomorrow, continue to ask yourself, am I ready to allow God to change me? Am I ready to listen? Am I ready to release my willpower and go off of God's willpower? Do I want him to lift me up? Or do I want to continue to drag myself down? Okay? Let's stand and recite the Serenity Prayer.